This week isn't just big, it's game-changing. General Hospital.
The rain fell in thin, relentless sheets over Port Charles, blurring the lights of the harbor into streaks of gold and silver. Inside General Hospital, the storm felt quieter, but no less dangerous. Secrets had a way of echoing through its halls, and tonight, one secret threatened to turn deadly. Ross Cullum lay in his hospital bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling as if he could see through it, past the floors above, past the storm, into the tangled web he had spun. The steady beep of the heart monitor beside him was the only thing anchoring him to the present. But his mind wasn't here. It was with Pascal. That name alone tightened something deep in Cullum's chest. Not fear, not exactly. It was calculation, a cold, methodical awareness that something had gone wrong. Very wrong. Pascal hadn't been part of the plan. He was never supposed to matter. But people like Pascal, quiet, observant, underestimated, often turned out to be the most dangerous. He didn't need power. He didn't need status. All he needed was knowledge. And Pascal knew too much. Cullum closed his eyes briefly, replaying the moment everything began to unravel. 2 vials missing. That was all it took. At Windermere, the air had been thick with tension the night Pascal discovered the empty slots in the safe. He hadn't panicked. Pascal wasn't the panicking type. Instead, he'd stood there in silence, staring at the gap where Britt Westbourne's medication should have been. 2 vials gone. Not misplaced. Taken. Pascal had felt it instantly, the shift in the room, the invisible thread connecting that missing medication to something darker. Something deliberate. He hadn't trusted Jen Sidwell to take it seriously. Sidwell had been distracted, focused on other matters, Lucas Jones, Marco Rios, and the growing suspicion that someone was pulling strings behind the scenes. So Pascal had done what he thought was the logical thing. He called Ross Cullum. Cullum exhaled slowly in the hospital bed, his jaw tightening as he remembered that call. Pascal's voice had been steady, but there was urgency beneath it. 2 vials are missing, he'd said. From the safe. Cullum had paused, not because he was surprised, but because he had to decide how much Pascal already understood. Are you certain? Cullum had asked, his tone controlled. I checked twice, Pascal replied. This isn't a mistake. There had been a beat of silence. Pascal had expected action, swift, decisive action. He believed Cullum would go after Lucas. He was wrong. Instead, Cullum had made a different choice. A fatal one. Marco Rios had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, or perhaps, from Cullum's perspective, exactly where he needed to be. The alley had been dark, quiet, the kind of place where screams didn't travel far. Marco hadn't even seen him coming. The knife had flashed once, twice, efficient, precise. Cullum didn't linger. He never did. By the time Marco's body hit the ground, Cullum was already disappearing into the shadows. Another loose end tied off. Or so he thought. Now, lying in his hospital bed, Cullum knew better. Because Pascal wasn't fooled. Pascal hadn't wanted Marco dead. That was the problem. Across town, Pascal stood by the window of a dimly lit room, staring out at the rain just as Cullum had hours earlier. But unlike Cullum, Pascal's thoughts weren't clouded by strategy. They were driven by grief. Marco's face lingered in his mind, his smile, the quiet warmth he carried, the way he looked at Pascal as if he truly saw him. Pascal hadn't said anything, hadn't acted on those feelings, but they had been there, real. And now Marco was gone, brutally, violently. Pascal clenched his fists. This wasn't supposed to happen, he whispered to himself. He knew who had done it. Maybe not with absolute proof, but with certainty born from instinct and logic. Ross Cullum. The pieces fit too neatly. The missing vials. The call. Cullum's sudden silence afterward. And then Marco's murder. Pascal wasn't like Sidwell. He didn't chase convenient answers or fall for easy blame. While Sidwell had turned his suspicion towards Sonny Corinthos, Pascal saw through the misdirection. Cullum had made a move, and now Pascal had to decide what to do about it. Back at the hospital, Cullum shifted slightly, wincing as pain shot through his side. The gunshot wound was healing, but not fast enough. Time wasn't on his side. If Pascal spoke, if he connected the dots publicly, it would unravel everything. Sidwell would turn on him. The WSB would start asking questions. And Cullum couldn't allow that. He opened his eyes, a cold resolve settling in. Pascal had to be silenced. Permanently. The door to Cullum's hospital room creaked open softly. A nurse stepped in, checking his chart. "You should be resting," she said gently. Cullum gave a faint, convincing smile. "I will." But his mind was already working. There were options. There were always options. If he moved quickly, he could handle it himself after discharge. But that carried risk. Too many eyes. Too many unknowns. No, this required precision. Distance. He needed someone else. Another operative. Cullum reached slowly toward the small burner phone hidden beneath his pillow. The movement was subtle, practiced. Years of training made it second nature. He waited until the nurse left before pulling it out. One message. That was all it would take. He typed carefully. Loose end. Immediate action required. He hesitated for only a fraction of a second before hitting send. Across town, Pascal felt it before he saw it. That creeping sensation that he was no longer alone. He turned from the window slowly, his instinct sharpening. Someone was coming. Pascal wasn't naive. He understood the danger he was in. The moment he connected Cullum to Marco's death, he had crossed a line. There was no going back. But Pascal wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Grief had burned that out of him, leaving behind something harder. Something sharper. If Cullum wanted to silence him, he would have to try. And Pascal would be ready. The rain intensified, pounding against the streets of Port Charles like a warning. Somewhere in the darkness, a figure moved, silent, deliberate. Cullum's message had been received. The mission was clear. Eliminate Pascal. Back in the hospital, Cullum leaned back against his pillow, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. Soon the problem would be solved. Pascal's secrets would die with him. And Sidwell would continue chasing the wrong enemy. Everything would fall back into place. But Cullum underestimated one thing. Pascal wasn't just a loose end. He was a man with nothing left to lose. Pascal opened a drawer and pulled out a small object, a flash drive. Insurance. Everything he knew. Everything he suspected. Names, timelines, connections. Including Ross Cullum. Pascal stared at it for a long moment before slipping it into his pocket. "If I go down," he murmured, "you go down with me." The storm raged on, swallowing the city in darkness. Two men stood on opposite sides of a deadly game. One determined to erase the truth. The other ready to expose it, no matter the cost. And somewhere between them, death was already on its way. By morning, Port Charles might wake up to another body. Or something far more explosive. Because this time, the truth wasn't going quietly.